the Hollywood Unapologetic Podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials.
Ever stop to think about how a director paints a story? Not with words, but, with light and shadow, with the way the camera sees the world. It feels like pure magic sometimes. And for you creators out there, this new Hollywood generation, well, understanding that magic, the art of cinematography, it's more powerful than ever now, especially with technology moving so fast.
Absolutely. We're going to explore the core techniques, really the language of cinema.
Okay.
And how those techniques have changed, from the very earliest film days right up to the digital revolution we're in now.
And crucially, how today's tech is putting incredible power into the hands of new filmmakers, right?
Precisely, how it's shaping things for you listening.
Okay, our intel comes from a few places. We looked at Wikipedia's pages on cinematography and the rule of thirds, Studio Binder's big guide to film lighting.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and Raindance's take on the impact of digitalization on the film industry, plus Filmastarge's look at unfolding the future of film technology.
So a really solid mix of the practical and the forward-looking stuff.
Exactly. A good toolkit for exploring this.
Indeed. So let's start maybe with the basics. Cinematography, what is it, really?
Right.
It's the art and, the science, too, of capturing moving images, whether that's on actual film stock or, more commonly now, digitally.
So using the camera and lenses to focus light onto sensors or film.
Exactly. But it's more than just recording. It's about actively shaping how the audience sees the story, controlling perspective, controlling light.
It's like a visual language, even without any dialogue sometimes.
That's a perfect way to put it. So what are the fundamental building blocks of that language?
Good question. Where do we start?
Well, one of the absolute fundamentals has to be the image sensor or the film stock. Historically, we went from really fragile paper film to celluloid.
Right. 35 millimeter became the standard, didn't it? Kodak.
Yeah, 35 mil was the workhorse. But filmmakers had choices. Reversal film versus negative film, each looked different. Then film speed, the ISO.
That affected sensitivity to light, graininess.
Exactly. Sensitivity, grain, contrast, color saturation. And they had different gauges, too. Little 8 millimeter for home movies, 16 millimeter, the standard 35 millimeter, all the way up to epic 65 millimeter for big productions.
Wow. So choosing your film stock back then was a massive artistic decision. It wasn't just technical.
Oh, absolutely critical. Now, contrast that with today's digital sensors. The flexibility is just immense. Yeah. One digital camera, through settings, maybe some post-production work, it can mimic the look and feel of dozens of different old film stocks.
It's like having a whole library of film types built in.
Pretty much. It's like having an entire library of film emulsions right there at your fingertips.
That must be a huge advantage for independent creators, I imagine. Cuts down costs, maybe.
Definitely a game changer for access and budget.
Okay.
What about lenses? They're not all the same, are they?
Definitely not. They're critical, right, for shaping how we see things.
Totally. The lens's focal length is probably the first thing you think about. It dictates the field of view, how wide or narrow your shot is, and also how perspective looks.
So wide angle makes things look further apart, exaggerates depth.
Yeah, exactly. Things in the foreground seem big, the background feels distant, and then telephoto lenses, or long focus lenses, they do the opposite. They compress space, make distant objects feel closer.
And normal lenses try to mimic how we see.
Sort of, yeah, approximate human vision. Then you've got specialized ones like macro for super close-ups and zoom lenses that give you a range of focal lengths.
Versus prime lenses, which are fixed.
Right. Primes have a fixed focal length. Often they give you maybe slightly better image quality, or they perform better when there isn't much light.
Okay. And I've heard about T-stops versus F-stops. Is that important?
It is, yeah, especially for professionals. So the f-stop is like the theoretical size of the lens opening. But the T-stop, the transmission stop, measures the actual amount of light that makes it through the lens to the sensor.
Ah, so T-stops are more accurate for exposure.
Much more accurate, especially if you're swapping between different lenses during a shoot. You want that exposure to be consistent. Think of the f-stop as the advertised size, and the T-stop as like the real-world performance.
Got it. So lens choice is clearly not just practical, it's storytelling. Another term that always comes up is depth of field. What's the deal there?
Okay, depth of field. Basically, it's the zone in your shot, from near to far, that looks acceptably sharp.
And that's controlled by?
Mostly by the lens's focal length, which we just talked about, and its aperture, how wide the opening inside the lens is.
Right, the f-stop number again?
Exactly. So a smaller aperture, which confusingly have a higher f-stop number, gives you deep depth of field. More of the scene is in focus, foreground, and background.
Okay, deep focus, everything's sharp.
Right. Then a wider aperture, a lower f-stop number, creates a shallow depth of field. So maybe your subject is sharp, but the background behind them is nicely blurred out.
Which helps isolate the subject, draw attention.
Precisely. And getting that nice shallow depth of field, that was actually a bit tricky with early digital video cameras. They often had smaller sensors.
Oh, right. So people used adapters, and then DSLRs became popular for video partly because of that.
Exactly. Optical adapters, then the whole DSLR video revolution. And now we have video cameras with much larger sensors specifically designed for that cinematic look.
And what about rack focus?
Rack focus is when you intentionally shift the focus during the shot. Maybe from a character in the foreground to something happening in the background or vice versa. It directs the viewer's eye.
Cool technique. Okay, so we've got focus. What about the actual shape of the picture? Aspect ratio and framing. Screens aren't all the same shape.
No, definitely not. Aspect ratio is just that the ratio of the image's width to its height. Simple idea, but it's changed a lot.
Like silent films were almost square.
Well, there was some variation, but yeah, 4.3 or 1.34.1 became pretty common. Then when sound came in, they needed space on the film for the audio track.
So the picture got slightly narrower.
Yeah, leading to the Academy ratio, which was 1.37.1. That was standard for quite a while.
Until TV came along.
Right. In the 50s, film needed to compete, so boom. Widescreen formats exploded. CinemaScope, super wide, like 2.35 or 2.39 to 1.
And the more common widescreen we see in theaters now.
Often that's 1.85.1, especially in the US and UK. And then for HD video, TVs, online content, 16.9 became the standard, which is 1.78.1.
And how do they get those super wide images onto standard film? That's the anamorphic thing.
Yeah, the anamorphic process. Basically, you use a special lens to squeeze the wide image horizontally onto the film frame. And then when you project it, another lens unsqueezes it back to its proper width. Clever stuff.
Very clever. And framing is just composing within that rectangle.
Exactly. Using that chosen aspect ratio. How do you arrange everything? Where do you put people, objects? How do you guide the eye? And a really fundamental principle for framing is the rule of thirds.
Ah, yes, the rule of thirds. The grid lines you see on camera display sometimes. 2 horizontal, 2 vertical.
That's the one. The idea is you divide your frame into 9 equal boxes with those lines.
Okay.
And the rule of thirds suggests that placing your key subjects or points of interest along those lines, or even better, where the lines intersect.
The PowerPoints.
Yeah, they're sometimes called that. Placing things there tends to create a more visually pleasing, more dynamic composition than just sticking everything dead center.
So it avoids feeling static.
Exactly. Like, don't put the horizon slap bang in the middle. Put it on the top or bottom third line. If you're filming someone, maybe align their eyes with the top horizontal line.
And leaving space if they're looking or moving.
Right. That's called lead room or looking room. If someone's looking left, you leave a bit more empty space on the left side of the frame. Feels more natural, gives them space to look into.
Makes sense. It's about balance and interest. Okay, let's shift gears to something absolutely critical for mood. Lighting.
Oh, lighting is huge.
Yeah.
It's not just about being able to see things. It shapes everything. Composition, texture, and maybe most importantly, mood. Emotion.
It creates the shadows, the highlights.
Exactly. It directs attention. We talk about natural light, sunlight, moonlight.
Yeah.
And artificial light, stuff filmmakers create.
And within a scene, you might have the general ambient light that's just there.
Yeah, the overall light level. And then practical lighting, which are light sources that are actually part of the scene and visible, like a desk lamp or a candle or street lights outside a window.
And filmmakers have specific techniques to control all this light, don't they?
Oh yeah, lots. 3-point lighting is like the classic textbook setup.
Key, fill, and backlight.
That's it. Your key light is the main brightest light on the subject. The fill light is usually softer, placed opposite the key, and it just fills in some of the shadows the key creates, makes them less harsh.
Okay.
And the backlight, sometimes called a rim light or hair light, comes from behind the subject, helps separate them from the background, gives them definition.
It creates that little outline.
Yeah, makes them pop. Then you have different overall styles. High key lighting is bright, even very few shadows. Think comedies, upbeat scenes.
And low-key is the opposite, more dramatic.
Much more dramatic. High contrast, deep shadows, lots of darkness. Think film noir, thrillers. That high contrast look is often called chiaroscuro.
Like the old paintings?
Exactly. And of course you can use colored light too, putting gels over your lights to tint the scene, create specific moods. Very powerful.
It sounds like there's a whole science to measuring and predicting light too.
There definitely is. You've got lumens, which measures the total output of a light source. But cinematographers often focus on incidental light, how much light is falling on the subject. That's measured in lux or foot candles.
Okay.
And then reflective light, which is the light bouncing off the subject that actually goes into the camera lens. And you need to understand light fall off, how light gets dimmer the further away you are from the source. It follows the inverse square law.
Right. Doubles the distance, quarter the light, something like that.
That's the one. And color temperature is vital, measured in Kelvin. It tells you if a light source is warm, like reddish yellow, or cool, more bluish.
So matching indoor lights to daylight, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Or using the difference creatively. Lower Kelvin numbers are warmer, higher numbers are cooler.
Okay. And quickly, I've heard terms like exposure, aperture, hard light, soft light. Can you unpack those?
Sure. Exposure is just the overall brightness of your image. Overexposure means it's too bright, you lose detail in the highlights. Underexposure, too dark, lose detail in the shadows.
And aperture, we mentioned that with depth of field, controls how much light gets in, measured in f-stop.
Correct. Then hard light versus soft light. Hard light comes from a small, direct source, like the sun on a clear day or a bare bulb. It creates sharp, defined shadows.
Okay.
Soft light comes from a larger or a diffuse source, think an overcast sky, or a light shining through a big diffusion sheet or a softbox. It wraps around the subject more, creates softer, gentler shadows.
Less harsh.
Much less harsh. Yeah. Then there's the golden hour, that beautiful, soft, warm light just after sunrise and just before sunset. Everyone loves shooting then.
Definitely.
Smart side and dumb side lighting refers to how you light faces, placing the key light on the side further from camera, smart short, or closer, dumb broad. Lens flare is that streak or haze when bright light hits the lens elements directly. And bokeh is the quality of the blur in the out-of-focus parts of the image. People often like those smooth, round, blurred highlights.
Wow, so many subtle things that add up. And what about the actual lights and tools they use, the lighting gear?
Oh, the list is long. You've got traditional tungsten lights, which are warm, powerful HMI lights that are closer to daylight color, fluorescent lights, including things like Kino Floss, known for being soft, and now everywhere, LEDs.
LEDs seem to have taken over.
They really have. Super versatile, energy efficient. You can often dial in the exact color, temperature, and brightness, even change colors instantly. Very flexible.
And you mentioned gels for color. What about making light softer? Diffusers.
Exactly. Soft boxes, which are literally boxes you put over a light with diffusion material on the front. Big frames with diffusion paper, fabric, silks. Even natural things like fog or clouds act as giant diffusers.
And bouncing light?
Yeah, reflectors can be simple whiteboards or silver or gold surfaces to bounce light back onto the subject, fill in shadows. And crucial tool, a light meter, to actually measure the light accurately and set your exposure.
It really is like painting with light. Okay, let's talk about movement. Camera movement. That adds so much energy or feeling.
Absolutely. How the camera moves or doesn't move is a huge part of the visual storytelling.
Whoa.
Basic moves.
Yeah.
Panning is turning the camera left or right on a tripod. Tilting is pointing it up or down.
Okay, simple enough.
Then you get the camera itself moving through space.
Okay.
Dollying is moving the whole camera towards or away from the subject, usually on a wheel platform, a dolly. Tracking or trucking is moving the camera sideways, often parallel to the action, maybe on tracks laid down.
Like following someone walking down a street.
Exactly. And craning or booming involves moving the camera vertically, up or down, often on a big crane arm, allowing for really sweeping shots.
And the Steadicam was a big deal, right? For smooth handheld shots.
Huge revolution in the late 70s. Before that, handheld was shaky. Steadicam and all the gimbals and stabilizers that followed allow for incredibly smooth, fluid movement, even while walking or running with the camera. Really freed things up.
Opened up possibilities. What about things like slow motion or time-lapse? Are those cinematography techniques too?
Yeah, definitely. They fall under the umbrella of special effects, often specifically in-camera effects because you achieve them during filming by manipulating the frame rate.
So not necessarily digital effects added later.
Not originally, no. Early cinema relied heavily on clever in-camera tricks, like stop motion, famously used in the execution of Mary Stuart way back when. Stop the camera, change something, start again.
Creates illusions, like magic tricks.
Very much so. Méliès was a master of this. Double exposure was another early one, exposing the film twice to make ghosts appear, like in the Corsican Brothers.
Cool.
And frame rate selection is key. Shoot slower than normal playback speed, you get time-lapse, clouds speeding across the sky, flowers blooming.
Compressing time.
Right. Shoot faster than normal playback speed, play it back normally, you get slow motion. emphasizes action, adds drama. I think The Matrix bullet time, though that involved more complex tech, too.
Right, and speed ramping, changing speed within a shot.
Yeah, going from normal speed to slow-mo or vice versa within the same take. Chaplin used it in modern times. It's a very dynamic effect.
Fascinating how long these ideas have been around, which leads us nicely into the history. How did cinematography evolve over time? It's quite a journey.
It's an amazing journey. The 19th century was full of these pre-cinema inventions. The stroboscope, phenakistoscope, zoetrope, all playing with the illusion of motion from still images.
Toys, almost.
Some were, but also scientific tools. Francis Ronalds made a camera for continuous recording back in 1845. Lincoln's Wheel of Life showed animated pictures. Murray's chronophotographic gun in 1882 could capture like 12 images a second. Initially, it was seen more for science, capturing things the eye couldn't see.
So the art and storytelling part came a bit later.
Mostly, yeah. The birth of cinema as entertainment really kicks off with the Lumiere brothers in France, 1895. Their cinematography could record and project. That was key.
Showing it to an audience.
Exactly. And those early years were just buzzing with innovation. People figured out editing pretty quickly, discovered special effects, close-ups, sound eventually came along, widescreen color. Hollywood started to form.
And the very first film.
The oldest one that still survives is the Roundhay Garden scene from 1888, just a few seconds long, shot on paper film. Before that, freeze green in the UK, Edison in the US with his kinetograph camera and kinetoscope viewer. Lots to parallel invention happening.
And then public screenings started.
Around 1896, yeah. Dedicated movie theaters started opening. Technology kept advancing. Mercury vapor lamps allowed for indoor shooting, which is huge. First animated cartoons appeared. On-screen credits started being used.
The Bell & Howell 2709 camera, you mentioned that allowed close-ups.
Yeah, it was a very precise, reliable camera.
Yeah.
Then synchronized sound films arrived in the late 20s, the talkies, widescreen push in the 50s we talked about. Color film really took over from black and white by the 1970s. Then large formats like IMAX gained popularity, and eventually the big shift.
From film to digital.
Right, mainly in the 2010s, that transition really solidified for most productions.
What about color specifically? You said it took a while to become standard.
Yeah, the desire for color was there right from the start. People hand-colored early films frame by frame. Think Annabelle Serpentine Dance in 1895. Later came machine coloring, or tinting the whole film strip one color for mood.
But that's not true color capture.
No, exactly. Just adding color after the fact. Real, natural color cinematography started appearing in the 1910s with processes like Kinemacolor. But it was complex and expensive for a long time. Technicolor eventually became dominant for decades. And even now, we see old black and white films being digitally colorized, which is a whole other debate.
Yeah, and that digital shift itself, that feels like the biggest turning point recently.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. The tech had been developing for decades, really. MOS image sensors, then CCDs in the late 70s, early 80s, made electronic imaging practical.
Sony tried early on.
Yeah, Sony pushed electronic cinematography in the late 80s with analog high-definition cameras, the HDVS system. It was used on a few things like Julie and Julia in 87, but didn't really catch on widely then.
Too early. Too expensive.
Probably a mix of things. But then digital recording improved. HDCam recorders came out, digital cameras got better resolution around 1998. That's when the term digital cinematography started being used more seriously.
And there were some early all-digital indie films.
The Last Broadcast, in 98, is often pointed to as one of the first features shot and edited entirely on, like, affordable consumer-prosumer digital gear. That showed it was possible.
But the big moment was Star Wars.
Yeah, George Lucas using digital cameras for parts of Episode I in 1999, and then shooting later prequels entirely digitally. That was a massive signal to the industry. If Star Wars could do it.
Right, mainstream acceptance.
Exactly. And the nail in the coffin for film distribution, maybe, was when Paramount announced in late 2013 they were going pretty much all digital for sending movies to theaters, stopping the physical 35mm prints.
Wow. So since then, digital's the default.
Largely, yes. Though, some major filmmakers still choose to shoot on film for aesthetic reasons. Tarantino, Nolan, they love the look and the process. But for most, digital is the standard now.
Which brings us right up to today and this new Hollywood generation you mentioned. How is all this modern tech specifically impacting them, the creators listening right now?
This is where it gets really exciting, I think. Digitalization has just slashed costs and streamlined, well, pretty much everything.
How so?
Digital cameras are way cheaper than film cameras in film processing. Plus, they're packed with features. high resolution, slow motion, even VRR capabilities built in sometimes. Things that used to be incredibly specialized or expensive.
And post-production is faster?
Hugely. You can see results instantly, not wait for film development. You can do complex visual effects, color correction, right on a laptop sometimes, real-time effects, fixing mistakes without costly reshoots. It speeds up the whole timeline and lowers the budget barrier significantly.
So it really is leveling the playing field for independent filmmakers, making it more accessible.
Totally. That's the democratization aspect. High-quality tools are now within reach for so many more people, so many more diverse voices who maybe couldn't have afforded to make films before.
And things like drones, too.
Oh yeah, drones are a perfect example. Wow. Getting those amazing aerial shots used to mean hiring a helicopter and specialized crew. Now, you can get stunning results with a relatively inexpensive drone. It's incredible.
And it's not just making the films, it's getting them seen, right? Distribution has changed, too.
Massively. Streaming platforms obviously are huge, but even before that, social media.
For promotion.
Yeah, you can build an audience, release trailers, engage directly with potential viewers globally, often very cost-effectively. You don't necessarily need a massive studio marketing budget anymore.
And the streaming platforms themselves provide distribution.
Absolutely. They offer a way to bypass the traditional gatekeepers, the major studios, the theater chains. You can potentially get your film seen by millions of people around the world directly through these platforms.
So it connects filmmakers and audiences more directly.
It really can, yeah. You get feedback. You can build a community around your work in a way that was much harder before.
It sounds like this new generation really does have unprecedented creative freedom and ways to reach people. Are there any specific emerging technologies they should be keeping an eye on?
Definitely a few key trends. Artificial intelligence, AI, is a big one everyone's talking about.
How's that being used in film?
Well, it's starting to be explored for lots of things. Pre-production, like helping break down scripts, planning shots. Post-production, maybe automating some color correction, visual effects tasks, editing assist.
But there are debates around that creatively.
Oh, for sure. Big debates about AI's role, ethics, creative control. But the potential to streamline some of the technical grunt work is definitely there.
Okay, what else?
Virtual reality, VR, continues to push boundaries. Moving beyond just watching a film to actually being inside an interactive story world. Think Ready Player One. Conceptually, it's a different kind of cinematic experience.
More immersive.
Exactly. And another really important trend, maybe less flashy but crucial, is sustainability.
Making filmmaking greener.
Yeah, much more focus now on reducing the environmental impact. Recycling sets and props, using energy-efficient LED lighting, offsetting carbon emissions from travel. It's becoming a bigger consideration in production planning.
So the future seems to be this mix of like super advanced tech, but also maybe a growing sense of responsibility.
I think that's a great way to put it. These trends give this new Hollywood generation amazing tools, incredible reach, more creative control, but also maybe encourage thinking about the bigger impact of how films are made.
It's definitely a dynamic time to be a creator.
Incredibly exciting. Constantly changing, always new tools and techniques emerging for anyone passionate about telling stories visually.
Well, this has been a really fascinating. We've covered so much ground from the earliest flickering images right up to AI and VR.
From paper, film, to digital sensors.
Yeah, it's clear how technology has constantly reshaped the craft. But what also stands out is that the core principles haven't really changed that much, have they?
Not fundamentally, no. It still boils down to using light, composition, movement, focus, all these tools we've talked about to tell a story visually, to make the audience feel something. That language is still the heart of it.
That visual language. So as we wrap up, maybe a final thought for you, the listener, especially if you're part of this new wave of filmmakers and creators.
Yeah, think about this. The pace of change is only accelerating, right? Technology keeps getting more powerful, more accessible. So the question is, how will you harness these incredible tools? How will you use them to push the boundaries, to redefine cinematic expression for the next generation?
A great challenge to leave people with. Explore, experiment, make your mark.
Exactly. Go create something amazing. You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.